Well, joining us now on Book TV is Bruce Herschensohn, a professor here at Pepperdine University. Professor Herschensohn, how long have you taught here and what do you teach?
I teach U.S. foreign policy and started teaching here in the beginning of 1998, really when the School of Public Policy opened up for students. Before that, I sort of had an affiliation with Pepperdine since the early 1970s.
What kind of affiliation?
When I think you know I used to work for President Nixon. Well, when he'd get a request to go to a college to give a speech or something, I always got I got the straw that meant I'm going to go in his place. And of course, the college was never very delighted to see me, but too bad. So most of the colleges in those days, it was rough going. I felt I succeeded if I was still alive after this was Vietnam and all of that. And so I remember sitting in a rental car with my hands on the steering wheel thinking, I made it. I got to the end of the speech and everything. So it was pretty rough going. When I went to Pepperdine, it was terrific. Well, I mean, a lot of people disagreed with me, naturally. It's mixed liberals and conservatives. But everyone was very respectful and it was and I really enjoyed it. And when I got back, I told President Nixon, it's a great place, Pepperdine. And so since that time, in the early 1970s, I had an affiliation in one way or another.
What's your history in California politics?
Not a great deal. I came out here when I was 8 years old. My folks came out here, obviously.
From
Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I wasn't successful at all in any of the things that I endeavored when I was 8. So they came out here for me. And anyway, it was marvelous, a great place to go to school. And in terms of politics, I got very involved in international politics starting in 1960. Very involved in defense, including intercontinental ballistic missiles in the late 1950s. So from that time forward, and once you start traveling around and doing these things in different countries, you get just engrossed in it. And at that time I was making movies, and those were the kind of movies I wanted to make, really documentaries. And then started making movies for the United States Information Agency, and President Johnson asked me, well, it's his administration, asked me to come and work for the United States Information Agency as its director when George Stevens Jr. left.
And then you worked for President Johnson, you worked for President Nixon.
Indeed.
Any other presidents?
President Nixon first at USIA and then at the White House. And I just got to tell you, the greatest expert of foreign policy I have ever known. I was very, very fortunate to work for that guy. Magnificent man. The world thinks, I shouldn't say what the world thinks, but he has received so much negative things thrown at him through the years and even lately that I just cringe every time I hear it, and I think, what do they know? For God's sake, what do they know? Most of them are so young that they're talking against it that they had to get it from another generation, and that generation got it from ABC, CBS, NBC, Washington Post, New York Times, from all of those elements that just hated him. And so, naturally, this generation, having heard it from the last one, they just believe it, because I hear a lot of very good people speak negatively about him, and that bothers me a lot.
Bruce Herschensohn, you got involved in electoral politics.
I did.
Did you win?
No, I lost, of course. After the Nixon administration came to KABC television and did commentaries and debates with former Senator John Tunney, great guy, incidentally. We still see each other whenever he comes in from New York or I go there. And marvelous guy. So we used to do 14 years of these things. And so once you have name recognition, you're better off than someone who doesn't. Anyway, so I gave it a try, and I got the nomination, but ran against Barbara Boxer.
In
and she
1992.
won. That was, yeah, that's correct, 1992.
But you ran again in 94, didn't you?
I beg your pardon?
You ran again in 94 for the nomination.
No, I did not. No, I did not. The first time I ran, and I knew nothing was going to happen, but it was 1986. And then the second time was 1992, and that did go a lot better, but I didn't win.
Bruce Herschensohn, you're the author of this book, Obama's Globe, A President's Abandonment of U.S. Allies Around the World.
Yes.
What is Obama's Globe? What do you mean by that phrase?
Obama's Globe is, I believe, now let me preface it by saying I believe. I don't know the man. I believe to him foreign policy is a nuisance. I think he loves the stuff that's domestic in nature. And when it comes to a foreign policy where a president really can do what he wants, he can't really always do what he wants. A domestic and economic policy, he's got to have a Congress that's for him. And if he doesn't, he can't do his stuff. But a foreign policy, you can do what you want as a president. And I find that either he didn't know that when he came in, which isn't saying anything terrifically negative. Most people don't even know this. I mean, I remember practically every president in my lifetime that wanted to do things, other than Nixon, he wanted to do foreign policy. And by God, he did. And he did it magnificently. But most people who come, and President Reagan loved foreign policy as well. So those two really loved it. Some others just sort of get stuck with it. And then they realize it towards the end of their administration. But take a guy like Bill Clinton. He came into office wanting to have a health care. That was his big pursuit, and his wife headed it. We call it, in those days, we called it Hillary Care. Okay, it didn't go anywhere. But when he wanted to go into Bosnia, he went into Bosnia. When he went into Kosovo, I don't think there was one member of the Congress that even knew he was going to do it. When he wanted to send the Navy to Haiti, he did it. And one thing that everyone forgets, 4 days of bombardments of Iraq to get rid of their WMD supplies. And he did that. All of those things he could do and did. And he can do it. He has the final say on things like that. Then you take George Bush 43. He comes into office. He wanted immigration reform. He wanted Social Security reform. But 9/11 happened. And man, if he wanted to go into Afghanistan, he went into Afghanistan. Good for him. If he wanted to go into Iraq, good for him. He did it. President Obama doesn't have, I'm not so sure he really quite gets it. The only thing that I think that sort of gave me the idea, I guess he does get it, is when he was thinking of attacking Syria very, very recently. That was before he decided to leave it up to the Congress. He was going to leave it up to the Congress, and then the next day, I think Vladimir Putin really saved his neck, because what he did was suggest this idea about having negotiations regarding the chemical weapons. Anyway, but he wanted the Congress to have the final say. He almost, I could sense, wanted to tip this. He wanted to move the advocacy of only having foreign policy. He wanted to move it to domestic policy, and then have the Congress take care of foreign policy. Again, I have to say, I think. I don't know the man, but it certainly appears that way. Really appears that way. What we have not done for our allies, what we have done for those who are either enemies or certainly those people who don't think well of us, is extraordinary and consistent. Well, when I say allies, I'm talking about Great Britain, the Czech Republic, Poland, Israel, Honduras, and then when something happens like a break, people in Iran demonstrating against their own government in 2009, nothing. You don't hear anything. Didn't help. Syrians, and I remember when I wrote this book, in fact, it's in the book that it's just, I'm not going to refer to the book other than to just say it was 5,400 people that had been killed in Syria at that time. That's a UN estimate. They were attacking Homs, H-O-M-S, the city. And it was 5,400. But the people in Homs were carrying banners, placards, saying, "Help us or we'll all be killed." Well, we didn't help them, and they have